Hi, everybody. We're going to give this a couple more seconds here before we start
Jeff,
this.
I didn't start it. I haven't started it.
Okay.
That was just a recording.
Got it.
What's it like being a jockey dad lately?
Very nerve-wracking. When Eric and Keith when Eric rode his first race, they were both walking in. I was walking over, and I was like, I wasn't this nervous walking over for the Derby. It was my heart was beating. I'm like, it was gonna jump out of my chest.
Wow.
All right, Lippy, I'm gonna start you.
All right. Everybody, we're going to give this a few more seconds while people jump on here, and then we'll get going. So let's call this a soft start to the Tuesdays at 2 with Steve Asmussen. And I can see the numbers are beginning to pile up here, so people are hopping on. Give it about 25, 30 more seconds, and then we'll get rolling here. All right. Well, welcome everybody to Tuesdays at 2. And we want to thank Steve Asmussen for fitting in some time from his busy schedule and his rotation of flights, landings, spots across the South and the Southwest, where he trains horses for a number of clients across the country. This is a neat call for us because Steve's an icon in this game, and we're delighted to have him as one of our trainers. We do have a few newcomers on this call, some new partners. So understandably, we'll do a brief bit of introduction, but Steve really doesn't need a ton of introduction. Normally, when you talk about people with his list of accomplishments, they're about ready to retire. I don't see Steve retiring anytime soon, but he's done so much already. He's a Hall of Famer, two-time Eclipse Award winner. He's really rewritten the record books. He broke an all-time win record 2 years ago, and that total now stands at an astronomical 10,322 trips to the winner's circle, although it may have changed this afternoon and added a couple more. Another kind of ever-growing trend from the impact of Steve and his training and his team, two of Steve's best runners, Curlin and Gunrunner, both who won Horse of the Year, are now really arguably some of the most world-class of the world-class sires. And we've been beneficiaries at West Point on both of these fronts because we've had some talented sons and daughters of Curlin and Gunrunner, and we have more in the pipeline. So, Steve, thank you for joining us. And if you would just tell us what traits Curlin and Gunrunner passed along, since I know you train a few of those, offspring. But what are the good things that Curlin may pass along and that Gunrunner may pass along?
That's a great question. They were unbelievably unique horses, obviously extremely alpha, dominant around other horses. Curlin himself, personality-wise, maybe it was because he was the first of his kind for me, how intimidated other horses were simply by being around him. And he was, I think, the flag bearer for our stable to teach us how to win races on that level. And I do feel that Gunrunner coming after him, it benefited as far as in the management of Curlin's career. But what we see in them, in their offspring, is with the Curlins, the hardiness, comes from, the Smart Strike pedigree line and how they continue to develop with time. They start off excellent, but the best ones, 4 and 5 year old years, the Cody's Wish, that are just, they become so dominant, but they're all very intelligent. They understand the purpose of training, and they understand the difference between training and racing. And then the difference that I see between Curlins and gun runners, I believe gun runners are more generous than the Curlins are, come to hand sooner, and a little bit lighter framed. And I think that allows for more racing from them.
Yeah, it's a great, it's a great thing to have a couple of either in your barn to compare if they're good ones. And, I think the breed and the game has benefited from the management that you and your team have accomplished with both of those sires.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, that's the highest compliment you could give somebody like me. Growing up in racing, my mother was a trainer, my dad was a jockey, and watching racing on a level you wanted to be a part of, and then to think that I've been blessed with the opportunity to handle and train Curlin and gun runner, it's dream come true for this kid.
Well, and I believe you me, the world of racing has enjoyed watching those two horses, and then certainly seeing what their progeny have done. We're selfish. We're hoping that an Asmussen trained son of one of those types of horses ends up being, that type of a stallion. But we understand it's a long shot, but we keep chasing that prize. Speaking of legacy, we were just kind of talking about this. The Asmussen family business has extended to Steve's sons, Keith and Eric, who are now both young and upcoming jockeys. Keith won a $300,000 stake a couple of weeks ago and is really ascending all of this year past with, I think, about nearly $3 million in purse earnings. Eric just rode his first race a couple of weeks ago and has been an exercise rider for Steve's barn for a couple of years now. And we were talking about how nervous you can be as a dad, when they're going over to get mounted up and ride. I will ask you this, as a dad as well. What happens when they're both riding against each other? How do you approach that?
Well, it's kind of unique, growing up in racing and stuff, there's that competition at all times, whether it just simply be your opinion, how you feel about them, just even you're handicapping everything in your life when you grow up in racing. So it's extremely unique, and there have always been very competitive against each other, but I feel in a very healthy way. I think how fortunate we've been to be involved with the horses that we are, that you realize how much you constantly need to improve. You flatter me with the mentioning our accomplishments, but while you're in racing and while you're doing this, the desire to improve every day is so strong. And I think that in Keith and Eric both, that is so special, how much they apply themselves daily, but with the goal of constantly getting better, and how much more we have to learn and try to move forward. And I'm extremely proud of how good they are with horses, the horsemen that they are, and to watch them communicate on that level, and love seeing them be able to do it in the afternoon. The discipline that they've shown at their height to be as disciplined to able to do the weight is extremely impressive. And I mean, you can see their love for the horse and why they want to do it. I thought it was really neat. Eric, after you mentioned his first rides a couple of weeks ago at Churchill and stuff, we were driving about, and he said, "Can you believe you get paid to do that?" And I just, you just love people do things for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's certainly an unwritten story now, which is even neater because we can all follow along. I'm going to move on to some individual horses. We want to touch first on the yearlings going to be headed to Steve next year. We're not going to do a great deal of discussion because they're really not under his tutelage yet, but we've got a colt by Candy Ride, son of Gun Runner, sire of Gun Runner, excuse me. And this colt is out of the mare Magic Star. And Terry and a bunch of partners saw him in Ocala last week, and there were lots of thumbs up. Those folks also checked in on the Twirling Candy colt out of Rehearsed, who was a standout at the Saratoga Select sale and is going to Steve eventually. We have a colt by Munnings out of a mare by the name of Tanasa. And of course, Munnings is a sire of a Jackson Traveler and others who have been a stalwart in Steve's barn for some time now. And we also have a gun runner filly out of a mare called All I Want for Christmas. She's with Steve's dad, Keith. We've seen so many top runners come from the Family Training Center in Laredo, Texas. We decided why not try to follow that path with this filly. And Steve, I will ask, because you're a little bit closer to that one through family ties. It's early, but smooth sailing or relatively smooth sailing so far with that filly?
Oh, absolutely. You know, you mentioned those four. They're extremely exciting horses, and being fortunate enough to witness them at the yearling sales and how, you know, what great prospects they are. You know, you mentioned the gun runner filly, very athletic, you know, just physically capable of doing what you ask for. I think you just let her get the miles in, do the work, let the calendar pass, and let racing come to her. But obviously those are very exciting yearlings.
Now, we're all pretty jazzed about it. And this is the time of the year where you do a lot of dreaming about what they're going to turn into when they start hitting the racetrack. So excellent. We're going to go now to the horses that are currently in Steve's care, Steve's team care, starting with Happy Gray. This is an unraced 2-year-old colt. He's a son of a champion sprinter, Run Happy. And he's been making some really nice, steady progress towards a career debut. He was at Ellis Park during the summertime, where a lot of the babies that Steve is responsible for will train. And then it shifted to Oaklawn Park when Kentucky kind of sent everything south and in this case, southwest. He worked a half mile on Sunday, and from the video, looked like he was going well to the inside of a workmate. But Steve, you're the ultimate arbiter here. What's your take so far on Happy Gray?
Very athletic. As you mentioned, he looks very good on the racetrack under tack, carries his rider well, very forward. He's progressing nicely now. Definitely is picked up on the idea going forward. Came out of the work in very good shape, and best case scenario, and I feel like you know, without weather interruptions or anything like that, where weather's really nice right now, possible start on the 31st of December for him at Oaklawn.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. Hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
Understandably.
Yeah. Well, waiting for how he came out of the work here at Oaklawn to make that decision, but very pleased with how he went back to the racetrack mentally and physically, and feel that the timing of December 31st is very doable for him.
Happy New Year, baby. Happy New Year. Okay. Jackson Travelers next. Unbelievable race to watch unfold in Hobbs, New Mexico at Zia Park last Tuesday. We saw him jump back really to what looked like his best form, broke like a shot, dominated the Zia Park sprint, won by, you know, a distance of ground, 5.5 lengths, and just missed the track record. He has been remarkably a stakes winner 4 years in a row. And Steve's team is responsible for his success. Great for his partners. You know, we pressed on, we gave a classy horse a chance to bounce back. And Steve, was it as simple as that last Tuesday? Or had you guys been seeing some subtle clues that he'd regained some of that fire?
We're extremely optimistic when you do this. And he's a wonderful physical, had run some extremely good races early on in his career. Took a couple defeats, took a little break from that. But it did take a little time for him to decide if he wants to do this again. You know, being an older male, he did take some races to come back. One more than I felt necessary. The race before this, I thought he had shown some life and some signs that he would break through. Kind of took the first part of that race off, but you saw him pick it up late to the wire, and then he trained very nicely and consistently going into the Zia race. And when he left the gates, you could tell it was the old Jackson Traveler. There that speed was again. And me being a fan of the Rags and Sheets, the speed numbers, it was great to see him run his 7, which equals his lifetime best. And very excited. Appreciate you guys hanging in there and letting him have the time to come back around to his best.
Well, when a Hall of Fame trainer says you might want to just, give it a few more, you'd be a dumb cluck not to say, okay, let's give it another couple of races. What could be in store for him this winter? Where do you see him at least setting up shop?
Well, he had run well at Oaklawn in his 3-year-old year. The purses there being very solid. They do have a sprint stake that came up opening week. Obviously, that was too quick off of how fast he ran a week ago Tuesday. I think that the next spot on the stakes calendar at Oaklawn is the King Cotton, which is probably third towards the end of January. But he came out of the win very proud of himself. I think the timing of that would be nice. And he deserves the chance in that spot.
Wonderful. Let's move on to Sense of Pearl. This is a 2-year-old filly. She's an unraced daughter of Kentucky Derby hero Street Sense. And she's been playing a little catch up after having some arthroscopic surgery done on her front ankles in June, and then having just a tiny, well, no, I wouldn't say tiny. She had a setback with kind of a frightening comic episode when she was on the farm. But she came through that with, great aplomb, and she returned to Steve in September, and she's been on a steady pattern with a handful of works, including one yesterday at Oaklawn. So I get the sense, Steve, that you're really being very patient with her, getting her sea legs underneath her. What do you think of her as she's starting to ramp up towards the debut?
Right. As you mentioned, filly that showed plenty coming out of the in-training sale, cleaned up her ankles, and then, very serious about a colic, had the surgery, did stand around quite a bit for the incision to heal up as necessary. So we're bringing her back a little. Her going through that, pretty traumatic, but definitely had some stall rest off of it, trying to progress with her slowly. Filly carries some weight. She still has some height to her withers need to come up a bit. She's still a little immature, but we're trying to add to where we're at with her physically, but we are taking the necessary time to get there with her.
What's her attitude like as far as training goes?
Very, very kind filly, very easy to be around. All the riders like her. She gives everybody a good day.
Excellent. No, we'll wait for her debut with bated breath, but know that it's going to be on her terms and on nature's terms, and that's the important part. Speaking
Absolutely.
of,
It's been very healthy. Her diet's been good. No residual effects of the colic surgery at this stage.
wow, knock wood on that. Finally, speaking of the devil, this is a 3-year-old gelding. He's on the comeback trail. He needed some arthroscopic surgery coming out of really a wonderful win at Saratoga in late August. He was actually avoided claim in that race for the second time in a row. And so the team, especially Steve's team, evaluated things and decided to clean up a knee with some consultation from the veterinarian, give him a couple months off over at Becky Maker's place right here in Kentucky. And he just moved back to Steve's care about 10 days ago. And Steve, we saw a photo, and very typical of Becky Maker's place, he looked really good after his time off because she.
Becky, I tell her, you put the pressure on somebody. You take them pictures, so you keep them looking as good as she has them when they come out of there.
I know.
Yeah, it's unbelievable for how good they come. How good he looks. Looks like he could walk in the paddock there. Very happy with how he's moving. Speaking of that, he's kind of a little wider than he is tall. He's a little butterball all the time, but he's moving really freely, and he ran some very good times in both of his races at Saratoga. The one benefit that he does have from the time under the HISA rules, 120 days between starts, we'll be able to start him back at the level that he ran last time without risking him for a claim. So we won't have to be past ready when we get to the races. So we'll be allowed to run him at that level without it's actually considered a waiver where he's not subject to being claimed. And I think that it'd be a very positive spot for him to start back at knowing that he still has a few conditions that I feel that he has an ability level to handle.
That's great news. And, it's nice for owners to not, be extended or risk, exposure, although that's been part of the game.
Well, it's a financial reward for putting a financial investment in them. And I think that it's more than fair.
I think that's right. And, what a great thing winning any race at Saratoga. And you made an awful lot of people happy that day. So well done there, Steve. That is
Extremely thrilling.
That's the extent of my own personal Q&A with Steve. So we've opened up the phone lines, and if you have a question for Steve about any one of the horses that we discussed, just know that he'll have more on the horses that are specifically under his care right now rather than some of the babies. But Mike Lydon wants to know, will Happy Gray debut sprint or route?
I'd like to start him off at 3/4 of a mile.
Asked and answered, Mike. There you go. Errol Kors wants to know, any chance that Sense of Pearl runs in December? And I think, based on just your feedback, Steve, she's going to be in 2024 for a debut.
I would like to take the cautious approach with her. Getting over the colic surgery, how long she stood still, I think that in January it'd be necessary.
All right, very good. Good question, Errol. I do have a question from John. John wants to know, you've won so much. What haven't you won that you'd like to win?
Well, I think the Derby sits there, but the most important race to me is the next one we have in. I mean, that racing is so unique in that way that no matter, how bad yesterday was or last week was, tomorrow you get a fresh start at it. No matter how good last week was or yesterday was, you still got to prove it again today. I think it's why I love the sport so much. You're not paid for what you've already done. You're paid for what you're going to do. And I think that's what makes horse racing so exciting.
Yeah, I agree. The next one is always a fun one, regardless of what level and what track. And
no, it's as good as we can hope to do. So let's win this one. I just have always felt that way.
A question from Jeff Litwin, just wanting to know sort of your, the timetable in your head for Speaking of the Devil. Understandably, we're a ways out because he hasn't worked obviously yet, and he's just shipped to you. But typically, and when does the butterball firm up enough to get rolling again?
Yeah, I think optimistically March, more realistically April.
And he'll be at
with
Oaklawn,
the opportunity. Right? Because of the purses, I think Oaklawn would be the right spot to start him back and take advantage of the waiver claim.
Got it. Trey Gordon. Let's see. Okay, so this is a tiny bit complicated, but I'm going to kind of reword it from Trey. Doc Asmussen, Eddie Woods, you've had horses that have gone through both specific training centers. Do you expect different things from different training centers, or is there a secret sauce that Doc Asmussen has or that Eddie has? I think that's what Trey is alluding to in his question.
They're excellent horsemen that employ very good people. That I've been very fortunate to have millionaires from both of them. And I think it's the product they get to work with that give us the results. But they're excellent horsemen, give them great care in every opportunity. But ultimately, it's how good is the horse.
Got it. Chris wants to ask, just to get a philosophical question from you, what are the factors that you weigh as you decide if, the horses that are now yearlings that come to you in the springtime or later on this year will race as 2-year-olds? What are the factors you look at most?
Well, obviously the horse physically, mentally, when you get there, but through communication with capable people like my father, Eddie Woods, Dr. Asmussen, they've been around the horse. They have a good insight to him. I'm fortunate enough to get to visit those places, usually Ocala during the sales. Obviously, start visiting my dad's for the holidays, pretend I'm working as I get mom's cooking for Christmas and things like that. But you just, when our dialogue is horses and how they're doing, and it's communicated to us. I think they're extremely accurate with them. They know their own horses. And when they move in, how the horses accept the surroundings, accept the racetrack, other horses, just the circumstances, your gate works vary and when they're coming. But it's a process that I think is aided most by communication with the people that have handled them the most.
So I have a question from an anonymous source, Zoom user, and it's a doozy. It's a tough one, but I don't mind throwing it at a Hall of Famer. I don't know if you'll answer it specifically. Which of the yearlings, and I think we talked about 4 or 5 of the yearlings that are coming your way, are your favorites as far as potential goes? That's a toughie.
I love the Gun Runner filly because she's by Gun Runner, but I must admit the Candy Ride reminded me physically of Gun Runner himself.
There you go. Magic Star, the one we're talking about there. And understandably, we were all together working, but also enjoying the fact that we were going to team up on the Twirling Candy out of Rehearsed that came out of the Lane's End consignment up there at
the Lane's End consignment at Saratoga. He looked like he could have walked across the street as being a yearling there, and he could have walked across the street to the barn at Saratoga.
You've had a ton of horses.
Imposing physical.
You've had a ton of horses, period, all sorts of different pedigrees and different, operations that have fed your racing stable. Have you had many Twirling Candies? He's a on the come type of stallion right now, seemingly.
Well, absolutely. We've had some nice Twirling Candies, a couple fillies that were a couple nice colts and stuff. But there was so much more of this Twirling Candy than some of the previous ones I've had physically. Yeah,
he's something else. Let me see if I've got any more questions here, or we may have finished things up. We do have a question from one of our partners. Well, I got one more here. Gotcha. Okay, so what about Street Sense? Have you had many Street Senses? Errol Kors wants to know.
I have a very nice Street Sense 2-year-old right now for 3 Chimneys that is coming off 2 wins in a row. His next target is the Springboard Mile on the 15th of December. But right. He won a key allowance race during the Churchill meet. Second was Honor Marie, who came back and won the Kentucky Jockey Club. And third was High Steel of Lucas's, who won the Ed Brown. So that's a Street Sense that we're very excited about right now.
Have you trained a ton of them, or just a smaller?
I don't think a ton of them, but we've been very fortunate to get some extremely good ones.
Yeah, certainly a Springboard Mile this time of the year is a fun race to have a horse that's capable of running in it. I have a question from one of our partners about an old West Point horse that just the way it kind of rolls through the system. Just briefly, can you touch on Shadow Matter? I think he may be with you. Is he doing fine?
He is. He had Eric worked him from the gates today at Oaklawn. Gave him a break off of the Oaklawn meet from last year. Another horse I plan on taking advantage of give him time and the waiver claim. But he actually will enter for a week Friday, December 15th at Oaklawn.
Well, we always pull for the horses that have been in our care at some point. So good to know.
Yeah, he's a nice looking horse under tack. He really is. I've had him one time previously, lost through the claim box, went back in and got him again.
There you go. All right. So I think we have exhausted, at least for the time being, the questions from partners. I see Terry's on the line here. And one of the things that's neat about, having Steve and a couple of our trainers with us is that Terry's had a long relationship with you specifically. You both, I won't say grew up in the game together, but certainly spent a lot of those those sales nights.
Don't be dating us. Don't be talking about how old we are now. Come on.
That's true. Positive. But Terry, you're on mute right now, and I don't know if you're able to converse, but if you wanted to add anything more to the conversation about Steve, if not, totally understand. I think Terry may be in listen mode. Okay. We yeah, and that's probably good for all of us, right? The stories that go back over the years, especially at the sales, are pretty good ones. Pretty good ones. Where do you spend your Christmas, Steve? Just speaking of sort of like the upcoming.
I'm gonna go to me, Julie, and all three of the boys are gonna go to my parents in Laredo. A little work and vacation. Check on the yearlings and the 2024 prospects, and enjoy a great Christmas with my mom and dad and the whole family.
Wonderful. We wish you a wonderful holiday, and just want to say thanks for joining us today and giving us such great in-depth analysis on the horses and sharing your stories and your history and your passion. We really appreciate it, Steve, and we wish you all the best in 2024.
So, thank you very much. Happy holidays to everybody.
All right, that's Steve Asmussen, and we'll be back next week for one of our final Tuesdays at 2. Take care, everybody.